Hello, everyone, and welcome. If you are new to this series, my name is Jason. If you are a returner, welcome back. And to everyone, thanks for tuning in. I always like to start with a quarantine update. This would be day 29 for me since I started sheltering in place and working from home. Lately, I've been looking into different ways to help in this crisis, and I've been seeing a lot of people put their 3D printers to use. There's been a lot of demand for ear savers, which are these little plastic bands that are used by medical professionals to relieve tension around the ear. So they call them ear savers or surgical mass tension release bands. So here's a couple. So we have these ear savers, and what's neat about this, these designs have been approved by the National Institute of Health. They have different grades of approval, approval for medical use, and then like approval for community use. Yeah, so here's an example of one of them in use. You see how it takes off pressure from the ear. Another thing that I've seen are these 3D printed face shields. This part is 3D printed. There's an elastic band, and then some plastic film for the protection. So yeah, so these are being printed everywhere, sent to hospitals. I do have a 3D printer. My printer is not quite in a working order right now. It needs some calibration. It's a pretty old printer, so it just needs some love. But once I do get it working, hopefully by my next video, I can print some of these things. And I do have some friends in the in medical fields, and hopefully they can use the support. Anyhow, let's go ahead and move on to today's topic, which is all about Steven's process and video editing with code. Let's go ahead and switch scenes here. And here we go.
In this episode, I'm going to challenge you to work with 5 videos of your choice on YouTube. Your goal is to get them into a folder. And in that folder, you can name them C1 through C5.mp4, or really any video file extension of your choice.
So here we see Steven naming the files C1 through C5. Notice that they're very short names, but they are numbered so we can see which order we want the videos in. And I know you can name files anything you want, but if we're planning to use code, it's always easier to have these short names, no spaces, because some languages don't deal with that very well, or some command prompts don't deal with the spaces very well. If you use spaces, you have to put things in quotes and things like that. So having short, precise names helps us when we're coding these things. So, and the MP4 extension, that's just a video file format. I know there's different codecs and things you can use, but MP4 is one of the most popular right now. Good quality, and it keeps the file sizes small. So let's go ahead and continue.
Since your goal is to get them into a folder, I'm going to put the pawns right here as a kind of progress bar. You'll see why in just a moment. Then I want you to combine them. For me, that's going to involve writing code and referencing those downloaded video files in that script.
By the way, the RKT right there, that is for a language called Racket. So Steven's going to write this code in Racket.
That's actually just step 1 of 3. That process, which for me is running a script, should output another video file. For me, I'll call it combined.mp4. But again, it doesn't matter as long as it's a video file. That's step 2 of 3. The very last step is to speed it up, again, using any process of your choice. For me, that'll involve running some code that outputs spedup.mp4. So the white chess pieces are a kind of progress bar for the 7 video files that I'm asking you to get onto your computer via some process like this one. The final one is a sped up version of 5 videos from YouTube that have been combined together into a single video.
So just to clarify these steps, we have step 1, which is to download 5 videos from YouTube, put it into a folder. Step 2 is to combine them into a single video file. And then step 3 is to speed up that video file, by some factor. And yeah, so those are the 3 steps. Those are, that's what Steven's going to challenge us to do. So I think next he's going to show us his process and what he does.
I'm going to use just half of my screen so that I can display the video that you just watched on the right-hand side, like this. What I'm doing now is uploading 5 different videos from a previous episode to YouTube. You don't have to do that. In fact, the starting stance for this challenge is just to have 5 different tabs open on a browser of your choice to 5 different YouTube videos. Remember that this is a test of your digital literacy, not necessarily your coding skills. So if you don't know how to code, just do this whole challenge manually with Shotcut. If you do, use whatever language you want. Maybe try to beat my time. Okay, those last 2 chess pieces are coming down. And we're off. I'm opening a script, download.rkt, and I'm writing a quick function so that I can download all 5 YouTube videos with a minimal amount of code. Into each of those 5 function calls, I'm going to paste the YouTube ID so that it downloads that particular YouTube video. I tried running it once but got an error, and then I realized that I actually had a mistake in my function. Now it seems to be working, but downloads take time, so I had to play some video games. I'm gonna cut this part out. Now, I'm opening a file called combine.rkt, where I'm going to combine 5 illustrations using vocabulary like combine and illustration, which I defined myself. Now, the Shotcut file looks good, and it popped out very fast, but when I tried to speed that up using the same trick, another combine and illustration, it fails, and I have to render it to an MP4 first.
Now, Stephen ran into a problem where something didn't behave, or it just didn't work at all, or didn't behave the way he intended it to. In the software development world, we call these bugs, and discovering them, eliminating them, that's just part of the development process. I mean, we are going to run into bugs. There's going to be things that we didn't think of. You saw earlier, Stephen ran into one of his own bugs where he just forgot to put, he forgot to pass in a parameter into his command. But he was able to figure out what went wrong, went back and fixed it. But now some bugs like this one, sometimes we have no idea because we have code that's based off of this other code that's based off this other code, and sometimes digging into it takes a lot more process. So part of the part of software development is managing these bugs and managing the debugging process, right? And managing your time, things like that. So let's go ahead and continue.
Or video games. I'll cut those out. But after that happens, I am able to output another Shotcut file of a sped up video. But once again, that's not quite complete. I have to render it. This time I'll do it in Shotcut, which...
by the way, just to clarify, render, I talked about render in a different sense, in a different context in another video about like rendering web pages and how when you deploy a website, it renders out the page. In this case, we're rendering a video. So when we have these MLT files, that's the file you edit with. It tells you which clips you're putting where you're cutting them, where you're splicing them, what kind of transitions you're putting in, and it has basically all the edits all the effects, filters that you want to put in there. And once you render it out, it's basically telling the computer to write out every frame by frame, and there's a term called flatten, and it's flattening the effects and actually applying the effects to the point where the file you end up at the end, you can't put that back into the editor and be able to just like change the transition. If it already applied the transition, like it did the fade out, fade in, it's not like I can get that video back. I can apply new edits, but I can't remove existing edits. And so when you render out a file, that creates that final output, and it's doing the frame by frame rendering. So yeah, that's what rendering means in here. And when you render it out, that means that final video can be played in other video players, which is the goal.
Appears to be faster, and honestly, I don't know why. About a minute later, and I'm finally able to open that MP4 file and swap that queen. The footage you just watched was at ×8 speed. And that's not the challenge. The challenge is to do it at a normal pace. I'll post a link below to my 17-minute video, which is how long it took me to go through the pipeline in its entirety, including the times that I was, let's just say, learning to play Slither.io because I was waiting for some MP4 file to be rendered. And I'll also post the slightly shorter 12-minute video where I cut out my Slither.io sessions, so that 12 minutes represents the cost of this pipeline as is. Now, I'd like to improve upon that, but at least now I have a number, 12 minutes, that I can improve upon. So
we're going to stop there. So we have the basics of the challenge, and Stephen will break it down in the second half of this video, but we'll get to that in part 2. So we're going to end part 1 now. If you're watching this on Udemy, there will be some assignments below. And for everyone else, thanks for tuning in, and see you on the next video.